Okay, welcome back to Mangging for my rambling reading of Dungeon Crawl Classics. So last time we got through sort of the very basics of the game, sort of discussed the Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy role-playing games and Appendix N, and we got through the creation of level 0 characters and the funnel. So now we're gonna continue on with what happens to your characters that make it out of the funnel. They have survived a harrowing adventure, and so now they are, well, they might just retire immediately if you think that's what your character would do, but most likely they're going to set forth on the path of adventure, and so they get to become level 1, and you get to decide for them a class. If you're human. If you're not human, well, you don't get to make much of a decision. You are just your class. We'll get to those in a bit. But if you're a human, if you're lucky enough to be a human, there's a few classes you get to choose from. Very basic, tropey classes. And you sort of are likely, I mean, you probably can, depending on your judge, depending on your DM judge, you can probably pick whatever class you want, but sometimes they might be a little bit more rigid, and you may have to pick a class for that character that makes some sort of sense, especially depending on what that character did throughout the funnel adventure. If that character found like a magic scroll or something, or a book of spells, and became attached to it, or whatever the case, they're much more likely to become a wizard than a warrior. Whereas if your level 0 character, your peasant, found a battle axe and charged into battle against a goblin with it, he's much more likely to be a warrior than, say, a thief. But depending on, how your table runs things, it could be either way. So, first off, we have the cleric. Very, very old school, traditional fantasy class. The cleric is a man of God, a man of faith, that uses and calls upon divine power from the gods, in order to do various effects, magical effects. Either, supporting his friends or smiting his foes. So there isn't anything in the DCC cleric that is super crazy out there. You get 1d8 hit points each level, which is not bad. It's somewhat average. And you have to select your god. As soon as you hit first level, you become a cleric. You have to pick which god your character worships. Now, you could have decided that, okay, my character, my peasant, worshipped this god his whole life. This is his god. But more likely, for a funnel, you're probably not even thinking about stuff like that. And so you just, boom, okay, I'm going to be a cleric. This guy, he's going to be a cleric. But he needs a god. So you could say, okay, he's been worshipping this his whole life. Or he discovers a new god. And that's what really puts him in the role of a cleric. He enters into this sort of service of a god that fuels his abilities. Now, it does not have to be a god. To be clear, does not have to be a god. You can worship gods. You can also worship devils, demons, monsters, fiends, chaos lords, demigods, immortals, celestials, neutral clerics can serve as druids, if you wanted to play sort of a druid character. There are neutral forces. And there's also Great Cthulhu. Yes, that's a bit of a surprise. Cthulhu is mentioned by name a number of times throughout this book. And like I said in the last video, H.P. Lovecraft was definitely a strong inspirational force for the original Dungeons and Dragons. And so that sort of concept continues to roll through. And from what I understand, a lot of the early D&D stuff had a lot of mythos entities like statted out and present in the books. So this game has Cthulhu and Deep Ones. As the deep ones are in the bestiary. I don't think Cthulhu is statted in this book. Pretty sure he's not. There's actually not a huge amount of info about Cthulhu in the book, but he's mentioned here and there, and you can worship him at level 1 if you so choose. So, depending on your alignment as a cleric, that's going to determine, you know, in addition to other characters where alignment sort of determines your general philosophy and way of acting and thinking. A cleric's god determines their weapon specialization, their weapon training. So they're trained in different weapons depending on whether they're lawful, neutral, or chaotic. And it also determines some other spells, and it also determines, like, healing capabilities. Because if you are a lawful cleric, you serve a lawful god, and this lawful god is basically fueling all of your abilities. So everything you do that's magical or whatever is because of this lawful entity. I keep saying god, but it could entity. This lawful entity. So if you take his powers, its powers, and use them to assist a chaotic person or a chaotic creature or whatever, that's not looked kindly upon. You know, that's not a good thing to this lawful entity. You are assisting its enemies. That is not to say you're forbidden. It's not that you can't do that, but we'll get to disapproval in a bit. But for say, I'm sort of going a little out of order, but lay on hands. Every cleric can lay on hands to heal people or heal creatures. So if you are the same alignment as the person you are healing, you will heal more, generally. You basically have a better chance of healing more damage. If you are sort of next to each other, so you're lawful healing a neutral, or if you're a neutral cleric healing either side, you sort of have middle-of-the-road chances of healing damage of, you know, varying amounts. But if you're completely opposed, so lawful and chaotic opposed, you're much more likely to heal less damage. You can still heal a bit, but not nearly as much as if you were the same alignment. So, yeah, that's definitely a consideration. So that gets into a little bit of a metagaminess, where if you're making a party that has a cleric, everyone should be the same alignment, so you all heal the most, because you're going to be taking damage, you want to heal. So let's all be lawful. We're all lawful, or we're all neutral, or whatever. But, you know, remember when I talked about min-maxing and all that sort of stuff? That just doesn't really seem to mesh with this game. So you certainly can all choose to be the same alignment for the purposes of healing, or other effects, but I don't think that's the way to go. You're not approaching the game in the right direction, I think. So you pick a god, and they give some sample gods. So you have, for lawful, you have like Ulesh, the god of peace, or Danthar, the mountain lord, Justitia, the goddess of justice and mercy, or Aristomus, the insightful one. Neutral, you've got Amun Tor, god of mysteries and riddles, or Pelagia, goddess of the sea, or Cthulhu, priest of the old ones. And yes, he is a priest. That is something often overlooked with Cthulhu, but he is meant to be a high priest. And then for chaotic, you have, of course, Ahriman, god of death and disease, Azi Dahaka, demon prince of storms and waste, Nimlarun, the unclean one, all sorts of stuff like that. So, yeah, so your weapon training, you can use any weapon, but you generally want to be using weapons you're trained in. So for lawful, that's club, mace, sling, staff, warhammer, a lot of, blunt force trauma. Neutral, dagger, mace, sling, staff, sword, so they can use swords. And chaos is any type of axe, bows, daggers, darts, flails. So you can see, sort of slashing, more like almost stealthy hidden weapons in a way. Not the traditional image of a cleric with his mace and shield. It's a cleric with a bow in the dark or something. And then it also determines well, there's also a little bit about sort of, you remember, like, lawful belonging to order and organizations and things like that. And that also is for clerics as well. So clerics of lawful alignment belong to organized religious groups. So some sort of religious order, generally. Chaotic clerics belong to organizations, but much more like secret cults and sects of the dark rituals of deific worship. And then neutral are, these are your sort of individuals. These are your druids that worship in the forest, the people acting independently to worship. And every cleric has an unholy creature. The creature is considered unholy by their deity, and so they can turn undead, or turn unholy in this case. So they can use a holy symbol to sort of, back devil, whatever, you know what I'm saying. So anytime they are in the presence of something their deity considers unholy, they can try to turn it, which, let me see what the exact effects are. It's a big ass book. Okay. Yeah, so they're turned. What is it? It just says they're turned away. I don't know exactly what that encompasses, but I guess they're forced to flee or something like that. And at higher levels, that you can smite them specifically. Okay. Alright. So, for lawful, you have the traditional sort of cleric stuff. The undead are unholy, demons, devils, chaotic monsters of any real type, medusas, basilisks, chaotic dragons, chaotic humanoids like orcs. It encompasses all sorts of the evil stuff. Anything evil, traditionally, is going to be under that stuff. Chaotic clerics, on the other hand, can turn angels, lawful dragons, paladins, that's crazy, and law-aligned humanoids, such as goblins. It's just sort of strange to wrap your head around, like, why are goblins lawful, but orcs are chaotic? They're both pretty similar. They work in groups. Are goblins that much more prone to order than orcs? I don't know, but that's just what it is. And then neutral, they get also undead and demons, devils, other monsters like basilisks, medusas, lycanthropes, perversions of nature, such as slimes and otyugs. But they also get mundane animals. So a neutral cleric can turn away or smite wolves, bears, dogs, birds, yeah, any sort of mundane animal. It's not magical. Pretty wild stuff. But if if you think of a neutral cleric as a bit more druidic, then I suppose that's so. 15 minutes in, great. Okay, so clerical magic, divine magic. To cast a spell, it's 1d20 plus the personality modifier plus your caster level. Now, your caster level is not always going to be your level. Most of the time, yes, but your caster level can be modified by different things, such as if you are in a temple of your god smiting his foe, the judge should probably bump up your caster level a bit, because you are much more in tune. You have his favor for your casting. But if you are in a situation of the opposite, you're doing something that is perverse to your deity, to your whatever, the entity, your caster level could go down, could go negative or something like that. It makes it much harder to do well on a spell. So if you roll a natural 1 on your spell check, that you have earned the disapproval of your deity. So of course your spell fails, and you have to roll on the disapproval table. There's a nice D20 table here for disapproval effects. Generally, these are some sort of test or quest or something like that the cleric has to go through in order to atone for their mistake. So, if you roll a 1 on the disapproval table, you must do nothing but utter chants and intonations for the next 10 minutes, starting as soon as he is able. So, not necessarily immediately in combat for the rest of combat, but as soon as combat is over, you need to do that to atone. What else do we have? The cleric must undergo the test of humility. For the remainder of the day, he must defer to all other characters and creatures as if they were his superiors. Yes, that's wonderful. Failure at the discretion of the judge means he immediately loses all spellcasting ability for the remainder of the day. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of fun role-playing stuff here, and I'm sure there's other disapproval tables on the internet. People have thought up stuff. So cleric's deity wishes to test whether the cleric is a man of the faith or a man of the flesh. Calculate the cleric's total net worth in gold pieces. Cleric immediately incurs a permanent -4 penalty to all spell checks. The only way to remove this penalty is for the cleric to sacrifice his material possessions. For every 10% of his net worth sacrificed to the deity, 1 point of penalty is removed. So you have to sacrifice 40% of what you own in order to get back to normal. A sacrifice can be destruction, consecration, donation, transformation into a temple or statue, etc. So, pretty much, yeah, permanently gone. 40% of your wealth. And in a game where wealth is pretty damn important, that's why you're out adventuring usually. Yeah, that's pretty rough. So that's fun stuff. Disapproval. And for every time you fail a spell check, so we'll get to spells much more in detail later, but basically, you roll your spell check when you're casting a spell, d20 plus blah blah blah. Depending on how high you roll, there are different effects. And there's can be a lot of different effects. So a 13 to a 14 can be one effect, and then a 15 to a 17 can be like a bit better effect, and so on and so forth, up to like 35 or something. So if you're somewhere between, you're above a natural 1, you didn't do that, but You didn't quite get high enough to get an actual effect. It just says failure. You rolled like a 7 total. You fail the check. And so each failed spell check increases the chance of disapproval. So when you fail a spell, the next spell you cast has a disapproval range of 1 to 2. So if you roll a natural 1 or a natural 2, you get disapproval. It's a crit fail, basically, on a 1 to a 2. And then every failed spell from then on bumps it up another number. So then 1 to 3 is a critical fail. 1 to 7 is a critical fail. If you're casting that many spells in one day and failing a lot, you can get up to the point of, having this massive disapproval range where continuing to cast spells really risk angering your deity. You can reduce that range down to 1 again by offering sacrifices to your deity. This, of course, depends on the deity, depends on the judge, and what the situation is. But this can be money in the same way as that other thing. You can sacrifice money. You can sacrifice your blood. You can offer all sorts of sacrifices, different artifacts. You can also do like some sort of quest or service for your deity as a sacrifice. All sorts of stuff. So for every 50 gold pieces of sacrifice goods, you decrease the disapproval range by 1, down to a minimum of 1. So yeah, you can do that. But a sinful use of divine power. Sinful activities include anything that is not in accordance with the character's or deity's alignment. Anything that is not appropriate to the deity's core beliefs. Healing a character of an opposed alignment, or healing or aiding a character of an opposed belief or deity, even if of the same alignment. Failing to support followers of the same beliefs when they are in need, calling on the deity's aid in a frivolous manner, and so on. So this entirely depends on the judge and what he thinks of the situation. He might just let some things slide. For healing a member of your own party that is of an opposed alignment, he may be lenient here and there. He might not always count it as sinful, but maybe sometimes. But for some big shit you're doing, you're like, I know this is bad, I gotta do it. He can definitely crack the hammer down. So this penalty can range from +1 all the way up to +10. And this increases the disapproval range. So if you do some really heinous shit as far as your deity is concerned, he can bump up your disapproval rating by +10. Which, of course, is massive. Now, normally, the next day, after a full night's rest, your disapproval range drops back down to 1. But gods are not always kind, especially like demons and stuff, if that's your deity. So, yeah, they may say, fuck you, and your disapproval range starts for that day at 10 or lower. In which case, any spell you cast has a 50% chance of getting disapproval, and then who knows what. So, yeah, nice. Lay on hands, you can cast that. It's just like casting any other spell, and we really haven't talked about magic yet, but the basic gist of magic is, like I explained, there's a varying range of effects. Magic is different for wizards than clerics. So for clerics, for lay on hands, a 1 to 11 on your spell check. So that's not a natural 1 to 11, that's just the range. 1 to 11 is a failure, which means your disapproval range goes up by 1, and if you roll the natural number that is in your disapproval range, you get disapproval. But a 12 to 13, actually a 12 or higher on your spell check for lay on hands is a heal. So if you're the same alignment, they get to heal 2 dice worth of damage. So for hit dice, which is not a super common concept nowadays. If you recall, I said cleric starts with 1d8 HP. Or they get 1d HP each level. So their hit dice is a d8. So if they were to use this, they get 2 dice. That means they'd heal 2d8. But a cleric can't heal more than their level. So if they're first level, no matter what, they can't roll more than 1 hit dice worth of healing. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go over the whole table here, but basically, if you're the same alignment healing, you can heal a lot more dice with a good roll. If you're opposed, it's generally going to be 1 die unless you roll really well, so on and so forth. A cleric can also beseech their deity for divine aid. Basically, they just pray for their deity to do something and hope that he does something. This does involve a spell check. And after they do this spell check, after they ask for divine aid, they get plus 10 to their disapproval range for the rest of the day. Just for fucking having the cojones to specifically ask their deity to reach down and do something. So the spell check to get to have them just light a candle, to have their deity light a candle at request, is a DC 10, which isn't extraordinarily difficult to hit even at level 1, but that's to light a candle. To do much more extraordinary stuff can get pretty ridiculous. But for the example they give is summoning and controlling a living column of flame is DC 18 or higher. So, you know, that's always an option for you. Like, if you're at your rope's end, you're about to die, yeah, you're probably going to ask your deity for some divine aid. And you just deal with the disapproval shit later on, but that's always an option. I wouldn't suggest normally using it to light a candle, but you never know. Yeah. So that is clerics. We didn't go over cleric spells. We'll go over that later when we discuss magic. We're 28 minutes in, so let's keep it rolling. Next we have thief. A lot more simple. Thieves are... Thieves come in different shapes and sizes. A thief can be sort of a hulking brute, you know, more of a thug that mugs people and just takes their money. A thief can be sort of the window burglar that sneaks in and you never know he was there. Or a thief can be a very smooth talker that just cons you out of your money. They come in all sorts of different styles. So a thief gets 1d6 hit points at each level. A thief is trained in blackjack, not the game, the weapon. Blowguns, crossbows, daggers, darts, garrots, longswords, short swords, slings, and staves. So they get a bunch of murderous stuff, as you might imagine. Thief alignment. So not every thief is chaotic. Again, you have to sort of abstract it a little bit. Lawful thieves, bit of an oxymoron, but lawful thieves belong to organized guilds. They belong to, you know, the stereotypical thieves guild. Or they belong to a beggar guild that just tries to... Not everyone is like handicapped. They're just pretending to be to get money. Or a group of pirates would be a lawful thief. Bandits that operate on the road in sort of a tight-knit group, that would be a lawful thief. Chaotic thieves are the independent people. These are people that work alone or maybe with a very small group, which they are generally the leader of. These are your assassins and con artists, murderers, sociopaths. These are your sort of the bad thieves. Then the neutral ones are just... It says they are the double agents. The kindly housekeeper who filches valuable baubles while the master sleeps, the inside man who leaves the vault unlocked one night, or the urban spy who sells secrets to his court's enemies. So neutral thief seems to be the least likely, just based on this definition. But these are sort of your people that are trying to blend in with society, but also thieving. So yeah, there you go. Thieves get their own language called Thieves' Cant, or Thieves, I think that's how it's pronounced. It's a spoken language, there's no written alphabet, and only thieves know it. If you teach the language to a non-thief, that's punishable by death, regardless of, whatever organization you might or might not belong to. If somebody finds out about it, the thieves are coming. It's very heavily protected. And so thieves use that to sort of communicate with one another secretly. And then you have thieving skills. This is really the sort of the last thing here. So, depending on your alignment, it determines your skill progression. Skills in DCC are very open-ended. There's no list of skills for most characters. There's no swim skill, there's no climb skill. These are all just based off of attributes, and if you're trained in a skill, if your character really would know and have experience doing this, you'd get to roll a d20. If you are just untrained, it's a d10, which is a lot harder to do well with. And if you're somewhat familiar, you might get like a +2 to the roll. It's a d10 +2, which is not great either. But in general, skills are pretty open-ended. Thieves' skills, however, they have a specific list of all the thieving abilities, and they have a set bonus for each skill that is dependent on your alignment. So it says here, Lawful Thieves, Path of the Boss. Chaotic Thieves is Path of the Assassin, and Neutral Thieves is Path of the Swindler. So it's a little bit rigid for my taste, to be perfectly honest. But if you are neutral, you have much higher bonuses for sneaking, picking pockets, climbing sheer surfaces, forging documents, things like that. If you are chaotic, you have much higher bonuses for backstab, disguising self, handling poison, sort of murderous stuff. If you're lawful, you have big bonuses for hiding in shadows, picking locks, disabling traps, find traps. Everybody can do everything, and they get bonuses for everything. It's just sort of, it progresses at different rates, and it maxes out at different rates. So, the skills are backstab. This is pretty obvious. This is your ability to do sort of a sneak attack, which gives you... you get to roll an attack with a bonus if you are completely unaware. If the person's completely unaware. And if you hit, it counts as an automatical crit. And so you get to roll on the crit table. And some weapons do additional damage as well. Sneak silently, obviously, lets you sneak silently. Hiding in shadows, lets you hide in shadows. Picking pockets, climbing sheer surfaces, picking locks. These are all basic stuff. Finding, disabling traps, forging documents, disguising yourself. Reading languages. So this allows you to read potentially any sort of language, I guess. Which could come in handy. Handling poison. Anytime a thief uses poison, he must make a DC 10 safety check. On a failure, he accidentally poisons himself. And then anytime you do an attack with a poisoned weapon, on a natural 1, you automatically poison yourself. And finally, casting spells from scrolls. So scrolls are not like some other games where anybody can just take a scroll and, fireball! No. Magic is strange, confusing, and esoteric, and it is meant to be. So a lot of wizards can't even read scrolls and get it to do what they want. A warrior will most likely never ever be able to properly read a scroll and actually get it to achieve an effect. And if he does, by some miracle chance, it will be like the barest hint of a useful effect. It's not recommended. If you play DCC and you're playing like a warrior or something, stay the fuck away from scrolls, man. But thieves have better than average chances to read scrolls. At early levels, generally they have about the same chance as anybody else. But it progresses depending on your path. Neutral thieves have the best chance, generally. And so at sort of the max end, a thief gets a d20 roll on a spell check for reading a scroll, plus, or modified by their luck. Which, with those odds, you have a decent chance, especially because you can burn luck, so you have a decent chance of getting an effect from a scroll. But it's still not, you're not going to be raining down meteors. It's just really never going to happen, unless you burn a shit ton of luck. Then it's possible. But you're paying for that. So yeah, most of the time it's going to be like, okay, it could come in handy, but magic is really sort of the wizard's domain. And even then, we'll get to that. Yeah, so luck is much more important to a thief than some other classes. They get to add their luck modifier to all of their thieving skills, I believe. Unless I'm making this up. I thought I read that somewhere. I don't know where exactly. Don't take my word for it, but look it up yourself. But additionally, whenever they burn luck, instead of just 1 point for 1 point, or 1 point for a +1 or whatever, they actually get to roll a die whenever they burn each point of luck. So at level 1, it's a D3. So if they burn 3 points of luck to modify a roll, it's 3d3. Which means it's not always as specifically, like, assured as other classes, but no matter what, you're getting 1 point. You know, the minimum on each die is 1. So no matter what, you're going to get 1 for 1. It just could be more than that. Which, yeah, it's not bad. I mean, that's pretty good. And then the thief also recovers luck, which most other classes do not. So each night they recover a number of luck points equal to their level. So at level 1 you get 1 luck point back each day, which is not bad. It's better than 0. And as you go up in level, you get to level 4. Yeah, I mean, you can spend 4 luck points every day and be alright. Which, at level 4, that's 4d6 worth of luck points every day. Pretty good. Okay, that's pretty much it for Thief. Warrior! Haha! Perhaps even a more simple class. But not a lesser class. Warriors get 1d12 hit points each level. They are trained in the use of battle axes, clubs, crossbows, daggers, darts, flails, hand axes, javelins, lances, longbows, longswords, maces, polearms, short. Yeah, everything. They are trained in everything, and they can wear any armor. That's what they get. Whatever. And alignment probably matters the least for warrior, pretty much. Just sort of affects, like anybody else, it affects sort of their philosophies. Whether they're fighting for, like, they're a guard or something like that, or they're just a mercenary, or they're just living off the land, or they're hired, or who knows whatever you want to decide. Their attack modifiers. Warriors get the best attack modifiers. So other classes get just a static bonus for each of their physical attacks. That just scales with their level. So level 1, it's like +1. which isn't big. But warriors get what's called a deed die. And so at level 1, for every attack they make, they roll a d3 with it. And that is a bonus to both their attack and damage. So at level 1, a warrior gets a d3 with every attack that is a bonus to their attack and damage. Which is pretty good. It's pretty good. You're swinging for like d12, adding a 3 on top of it. That's not too shabby. In addition to their strength. So yeah, that's pretty good. But again, it's not always as predictable, but for combat, it's just good. You want that. That's good. And so that scales up to D4 at level 2, D6 at level 4, D8 at level 6, and all the way at level 10. I don't know how you'd get up to that point, but level 10 is a D10 plus 4 to every attack and damage. Pretty good. But most important thing, well, actually, hold on. So warriors also get, they get better crit tables, because there's different crit table effects for each class, so warriors get the best ones, because that's what they do, is massive damage. And they also crit more easily. They get, at level 1, they crit on a 19 or a 20 natural roll. And at level 10, then it's a 17 to 20. So it's not a massive difference, but they do crit more, they're more likely to crit. They also add their level to their initiative rolls, so they're more likely to go first in combat. And yeah, okay. At level 10, they do get, they get 3 attacks per round. And at level 5, they get 2 attacks, but that's not that out of the ordinary. At level 6, thieves get 2 attacks. So it's not crazy different. But, okay, so the most important thing related to the warrior, the biggest defining feature of the warrior in this game is called Mighty Deeds of Arms. So, you remember that attack die, the D3 I mentioned. Well, that deed die is most important for the Mighty Deeds of Arms. So, at any point, before a warrior declares, before they do their attack roll for an attack, they declare a Mighty Deed of Arms. They don't have to, but there's really no specific penalty for failing a Mighty Deed of Arms attempt, generally. So there's really no reason not to attempt all sorts of stuff. So a Mighty Deed of Arms can be, it can be anything, really. It can be any sort of physical activity or action. Anything you can think of that would be accomplished through physical prowess can be a mighty deed. So, this can be a bull rush to push back an enemy, entangling someone's sword arm, like a called shot to somebody's eye or something is a mighty deed, tripping somebody, blinding somebody. They give a few examples here. When fighting opponents on a staircase, the character used a sword to stab an opponent and then lever him over the edge of the staircase. Later, the same character tried attacking the foe's legs to knock him over the edge. When facing a carven image with eyes that shot laser beams, the character used a mace to smash out the carved eyes. In another game, a different player tried a similar attack to stab out the eyes of a basilisk and disarm its hypnotic gaze. When fighting a flying skull that was out of melee reach, a character leaped from the back of an ally into a flying lunge that brought him within reach of a melee swing at the skull. When hurling flasks of burning oil at a giant toad, the warrior aimed for the toad's open mouth to throw the oil down its gullet. When fighting a chaos beast with a scorpion tail, a character attempted to chop off the tail. So this is just, like I said, it's anything physical that you can picture in a combat that isn't just, I swing my sword. Anything else, imaginatively, narratively, you can attempt with a mighty deed of arms. And so you roll, when you roll the deed die as part of your attack, if it's a 3 or higher, you succeed. You do whatever the mighty deed is, and it happens. However the judge decides, but it happens. If it's 2 or less, you do not. Now, at level 1, that means you have a 33% chance of succeeding, which isn't tremendous. You're going to fail more often than not, but you might as well try. And remember, at higher levels, like level 8, you have a D10 plus 2. That means you cannot fail a Mighty Deed of Arms, which is pretty good. I think it might be contingent on... Yeah, you have to actually land the attack. That's the kicker. You actually have to land a physical attack against a creature. I think it might be like... The attack can be just entirely consist of whatever your mighty deed is. Like, you don't actually have to do just damage as normal to him. You can just do the mighty deed, but you have to roll and you have to beat his AC or whatever. You have to actually land a hit. But yeah, from what I understand, the mighty deed is a really big part of the game, because it continually puts warriors on like an even level to wizards and clerics and whatever. The fact that they can always attempt and do this physical craziness is always a continual factor as far as accomplishing objectives. So it definitely requires creativity. If you're the type of player that plays D&D and just does their same action over and over every time in combat, that is not going to work here. You have to be creative to get the most out of mighty deeds. But if you are creative, yeah, there's a lot of potential here. Warriors, it's a tricky thing to balance out warriors to wizards. Wizards at high levels are just raining down meteor storms and just freezing people with a snap and turning people into giant warts and shit. And, it can be tricky for a warrior to compete. But there's certainly a lot of potential there. Now, for me personally, I'm not a warrior guy. I don't really care for that too much, because generally I like utility. That's the most important thing for me for a character, is their utility outside of combat. So for me, this is... Yeah, it's very specifically a combat thing. So it doesn't appeal to me that much, but yeah, I can definitely see the potential there. So that's Warrior. Wizard. Okay, let's get to Wizard. We're not going to talk about spells too much here, but I'll try to get through this quickly. Wizards get 1d4 hit points per level. That is the lowest. It's damn low. They're never going to be front line. They're trained in dagger, longbow, longsword, shortbow, short sword, and staff, and they rarely wear armor because it hinders spellcasting, of course. They get to use longbow. That's pretty damn cool. For alignment, chaotic wizards study black magic. Neutral or lawful wizards seek control over elements. Wizards of all persuasions practice enchantment. And then there is magic. That's pretty much it for wizards. So same thing for as for clerics. They roll a d20 when they cast a spell, plus their intelligence modifier, plus their caster level. And again, caster level can be modified by different things. If you are standing on an altar of power, casting fireball or something, you might get a big bonus to your caster level and make it much more likely to do a big effect with your spell. But if you are in some sort of anti-magic field, for whatever reason, if the judge even lets you cast or attempt to spell at all, there could be a big negative to your caster level. So that's sort of the thing that the judge can adjust depending on the situation. And so, depending on how well your spell check is, obviously you might produce a small effect or a much bigger effect. If you do not successfully cast a spell and it's a failure, there's a good chance you might lose the spell. So if you lose a spell, that means you cannot cast it anymore for the rest of the day. You forget it, basically. So this is not Vancian magic. This is not, you get 3 spell casts per day and blah blah blah, and you get this many level 1 spells and this many level... No. You can cast Fireball until your fucking hands fall off, if you roll well. But when a moment comes that you roll shit and you forget the spell, that's it. Nothing is going to make you remember that spell again. Maybe there's something. I'm making that up. But under normal situations, you are not remembering that spell again. You're done for the day. But otherwise, you can keep on kicking. But a wizard can forget a spell. They can forget a spell. Clerics do not forget spells. They just have the disapproval. But wizards operate a different type of magic, so they can forget a spell. If a wizard rolls a 1, a natural 1, on their spell check, then they... hold on, what's the term called? Well, they risk a few things. They risk corruption, and they risk misfires. So, a misfire is the spell not turning out the way that you had planned. And so each spell has a different misfire table. So, depending on the spell, it'll do all sorts of different things. So, let's see. Magic Missile is the most generic spell. So if you misfire a Magic Missile, there's a d6 roll to determine what happens. Explosion of missile sprays in all directions. All creatures within 100 feet, allies and enemies, are hit by 1d4 minus 1 missile, each doing 1 point of damage. If you get a 4, it's a delayed blast. No effect now, but at a random point sometime in the next 24 hours, determine whenever the caster rolls his next 1 on any dice roll, a single magic missile bolts forth to strike one randomly determined character within 100 feet for 1d4 damage. Yeah, and that's just a couple misfire effects for one spell. And you're going to have a lot of spells. You're probably going to be casting a bunch of spells. So misfires are going to happen, and they're going to be hilarious. But it's just very indicative of the random nature of magic, which is fun. Random is fun, people. So that's misfires. Corruption is when the magic... I want to see if they have like a better definition than I'm going to give. Yeah, here we go. Exposure to demons, radiation from other planes, elemental energies in toxic quantities, and the servants of chaos all affect a wizard over the course of his career. So each spell has its own corruption effects, but there's also generic effects. So minor corruption, the lightest amount of corruption that could happen to you. Here you go. Character's skin on one random portion of his body appears to melt. Like wax, it flows and reforms into odd puddles and shapes. This is an ongoing, constant motion that itches constantly and repulses others. What else do we got? Character's facial appearance is permanently disfigured according to the magic that was summoned. Character's hair is suffused with dark energy. Roll 1d4. Could turn bone white, pitch black, fall out completely, or stick straight up. You could pass out for 1d6 hours. Nice. Major corruption. Character's body feeds on its own mass. Character loses 2d10 pounds in 1 month. Suffers a -1 penalty to stamina. Or corpulence. You gain 6d12 pounds in 1 month. -1 to agility, and your speed is reduced by 5 feet. Your height changes by 1d20 -10 inches. So I guess that's plus or minus. Demonic taint. Your feet transform into cloven hoofs. Small horns grow on your forehead. Your tongue forks and your nostrils narrow to slits. Nice. Greater corruption. Well, that's some real shit. A sliver of soul energy is claimed by a demon lord. Take 3d6 damage immediately. Permanent -2 penalty to all ability scores, and -2 additionally to luck. Here you go. Your flesh falls off in zombie-like chunks. You lose 1d4 HP per day. Only magical healing can stave off the decay. Your head could turn into a fish head. Small tentacles grow around your mouth and ears. Yeah, there's a lot of shit you can imagine. And so they have a nice illustration here, very entertaining, of a young, well-to-do, handsome wizard and the effects over time of corruption. Assuming you can see all that. So there you go. Pretty good. Okay. So yeah, we'll get into all the magic stuff later in more detail. But yeah, that's pretty much it for wizards until we get to magic. They get to know more languages based on their intelligence, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so then that's it for humans. So for humans, you have cleric, thief, warrior, wizard. That's it. That's it. If you are a dwarf, then you are a dwarf. That is your class. That's it. You don't have a choice unless your judge decides otherwise, and he might as well go ahead and do it. It depends. It depends on the table. It depends on the game. So dwarves are pretty much just warriors. They get the deed die. They get mighty deeds of arms. They get all that. They get slightly less hit points per level, but they get a bonus if they use a single one-handed weapon and a shield. They are the best at that. So they get an extra action each turn that they can use only to shield bash. It uses a D14 instead of a D20. And by default it does 1d3 damage, but they get the deed die with it, and they can do mighty deeds of arms with a shield as well, so they just get an extra shield attack, which is nice. They get infravision, they can see in the dark. They're a little bit slower than humans, 20 feet per round. They can smell. Okay, basically they're really good at navigating underground. They can smell gold and gems out to 100 feet. And that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to say about dwarves. I like dwarves, but there's not a whole lot to say about them here. Elves. So elves are pretty much warrior wizards. They're a little bit. They're more frontline than a wizard, but they still get spells. They get 1d6 hit points each level, which is above a d4. They're trained in a bunch more weapons, including a two-handed sword. But they are sensitive to iron. They are extremely sensitive to the touch of iron. So this is an age-old concept. This is not new to D&D or anything like that. This is a Scandinavian thing from decades gone by. So yeah, if they have direct contact over prolonged periods, it pretty much burns them. So for every day that they have direct contact with a piece of iron, they take 1 HP of damage, which isn't massive. It doesn't prevent an elf from using iron stuff, but there is that thing. And if you're going to roleplay it properly, you probably would not use anything iron. But they do get access to mithril, which is not iron. And at level 1, an elf gets the ability to purchase some mithril stuff at no additional cost. So you probably want to take advantage of that. But mithril armor does affect their spellcasting just like any other armor. So they get to cast magic. And they automatically receive the spells Patron Bond and Invoke Patron, in addition to their other spells that they get. So, Patron Bond and Invoke Patron. For wizards, they have to sort of come across these spells or randomly get these spells that allow them to make a direct pact with a powerful entity. So this would be, Cthulhu or a demon or some sort of extra planar whatever that would allow them to gain extra power by having some dark pact. Elves get that automatically. No matter what, they get a bond with a patron. And Invoke Patron lets you call upon your patron to do some tremendous deed. Much like a cleric might call upon the deity, but this has specific effects. You roll on a spell table and it has specific effects for each patron. So elves get that automatically. They will always have a patron. Elves also have infravision. They can see in the dark. They're immune to magical sleep and paralysis. They have a +4 bonus to detecting secret doors. And within 10 feet of a secret door, they get a free check to see if they notice it. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's some other very minor things that I'm not mentioning. I always say these primers are not a substitute for reading a book, which may defeat the purpose of the primer, but whatever. So yeah, it's pretty much fit for elves. They are wizards, but they get slightly better combat potential. So you might say, well, isn't an elf just better than a wizard? And I recall reading a discussion about it. Wizards know slightly more spells throughout their career, which is somewhat offset by the fact that elves get Patron Bond and Invoke Patron for free. But depending on what kind of spellcaster you want to be, that might not interest you. Elves have the iron vulnerability, which isn't that big of a deal. And yeah, well, elves kind of are a little bit better than just a regular wizard. They're elves. That's just how it is, man. I don't know. Deal with it. For me personally, I'd rather be a human wizard than an elf. Just, that's what I like to do. But strictly min-maxing, yeah, maybe an elf is slightly better, but not to a huge degree. And then finally, for this video, we have the halfling. Halflings are a little bit warrior and a little bit thief. Perhaps a little bit more thief. But, not that much, really. Halflings get 1d6 HP per level, which isn't that much, but there you go. They're trained in club, crossbows, daggers, hand axes, javelins, short bows, short swords, slings, and staves. And they get a bonus to 2-weapon fighting. So they are best with 2 weapons in hand, which is a little strange, but yeah. So normally, if you want to fight with 2 weapons, any character can do so, but it is dependent on your agility. So if you have 8 or less agility, which is shit, don't dual wield if you have 8 or less agility. But if you do, your primary weapon has -3 on the dice chain. So a D20 becomes a D12? Yeah. So instead of rolling a D20 to hit, you roll a D12, which is god-awful. And your offhand weapon has -4 on the dice chain, so it becomes a D10. You're not hitting anything with that. Maybe a peasant. 9 to 11, those numbers go down by 1 each. 12 to 15, those numbers go down by 1 each again. 16 to 17 agility, both weapons are done with D16s. And 18 or higher agility, your normal is a D20 and the offhand is a D16. And yeah, if you have a 15 or lower agility, you cannot do any critical hits while doing dual wielding, so that's not great either. But a halfling always is considered to have an agility of 16 minimum when they are dual wielding. So even if you get a kind of shitty agility roll, which is likely, if you are a halfling, you can always do decently with dual wield fighting. Also, they can fight with 2 equal-sized one-handed weapons, so 2 hand axes, 2 short swords, blah, blah, blah. They get a crit and an automatic hit on any roll of a natural 16. This is if their agility is normally lower than 16. For the purposes of dual fighting, since they're rolling 2 weapons at D16s, they crit and automatic hit on a 16, which is not normally the case. But if you have higher agility than 16, then it's just normal rules. And if they are dual wielding, they only fumble, they only critically fail if both dice come up as 1, which is pretty good. They also can see in the dark up to 30 feet, which is not as good. They're much smaller, 2 to 4 feet tall. They have a slow movement rate, 20 feet per round. They get a bonus to sneaking and hiding in shadows. And they are luck charms. They are good luck charms. So, for every 1 point of luck that they burn for a roll, it actually counts as +2. Which isn't as good as a thief, especially later on. But it's very predictable, and it's a lot better than any other class besides. So, they get 1 for 2. But they also restore luck per night, just like a thief, so equal to their level. And they can also expend luck to help their allies. They are the only class that can do so. But they can, whenever one of their allies makes a roll, the halfling can burn luck in order to give it an assist. And they burn it at the 1 for 2 rate, I believe. So, yeah, not bad to have a halfling around and just be like, hey, help me out with this roll, and they just have to burn a couple points, and you turn a miss into a hit. That's a big deal a lot of the time. So, and they recover it every night, at a decent rate. So, yeah, it's not bad to have a halfling around as a good luck charm. So that's pretty good. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's about it. Okay. So, that's classes. That's all of them. There's not a tremendous amount we went through in pretty decent detail, I think. We didn't get to the spells yet for a couple of classes, but we will. Of course, this video was longer than I wanted it to be, but you know me. So, yeah, next time we will go into talking about some equipment, weapons, armor, some other stuff, but we'll also talk about combat and how combat specifically functions, crit rolls, fumble rolls. We'll look at some of the fun crit tables. That'll be entertaining. There's plenty of them. And yeah, then we will... I mean, that might take the whole video, I'm not going to lie. But, because there's also spell duels And so yeah, that might take the whole video, and then finally we get to talk about magic, which will probably take another video, and then we can talk about the bestiary. So this might be a 5-part primer. I just like to be a nerd. Alright, my name is Mang. This has been part 2 of a primer talking about Dungeon Crawl Classics. I'll see you fine folks in the next part.